Count us in, yeah.
Right, welcome back to Two Grown Men. As usual, Yemi here.
Hi, my name is Olawumi. Welcome back to Two Grown Men. And with us tonight, we have two of our brothers. We have Redd the Geek. And if I'm calling Redd the Geek, what am I going to call you, Niyi?
Redd is a super geek. I'm the underboss. He's the final boss.
No, I have bosses too, but yeah.
You don't mean it.
I do.
Anyway, everyone, welcome back to Two Grown Men. Tonight, we're continuing our series on talking about our passions, the things that we enjoy doing, things that bring us joy. This conversation has been a long time coming. Without much ado, let's jump into it. Yemi? Captain Yemi, guide us in.
Yes, so. So yeah, just like Laomi said, we're continuing the series, Follow Your Passion. And you talked about being a super geek and the is it underboss or under geek?
Underboss.
So let the super geek
under geek boss.
So I'm gonna hand the mic to Redd. Redd, what are your passions?
My passions.
Yeah, tell us about your passions.
So the passion, the things that make me the happiest. For the purpose of this conversation, I'll stick with comics.
Good.
Yeah, I'll stick with comics because there are a few. Comics, for whatever reason, I was a smaller kid. Amongst my peers, I was sort of fast. I was small, then I was fast.
Okay.
And you were what? Fast.
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 Right. How tall are you?
I'm 6'2" now, but the reason I mentioned that is because comics became like a solace or a place of hiding. I got into FGC.
You're stealing my lines.
Okay. You can, no, but you don't have to. We can both agree. I got into FGC woefully unprepared. At age 9, yeah. I was 9. I turned 10. So you know how Niger boarding schools are, right? Pretty much unregulated. You have to figure yourself out. And for the smaller kids amongst us, the way to figure yourself out was to find a passion. You found something that made you happy, that kind of just pulled you away from the world, from that survival, because it was pretty brutal. So for me, it was comics. I had a great support system from home. My mom used to buy me comics. I think I started with Whiz and Chips. I'm not going to date myself, but
Whiz and Chips.
Yeah, so I had Whiz and Chips.
Bino.
Royal
the Rovers.
Yep.
Royal the Rovers. Yeah.
I think before then, everybody knew Superman. I had the whole Superman.
Redd, sorry, just as you were saying that, the first thing that jumped to my mind, because you're going that back, do you remember Garrett in Daily Times?
I do. Goth.
Goth.
Yeah, Goth.
Yeah. I remember Goth. Yeah. Yep.
That's
Modesty Blaze.
So Modesty Blaze was actually based off. There was a movie, Modesty Blaze.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know that.
So then they had the comic strip. The movie wasn't that serious. She wore black leather. She was Catwoman before Catwoman, the way she dressed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just throwing shade on Halle Berry there, no problem.
So comics. I started with. I believe I used my first lunch money to buy ROM. I don't know if anybody knows ROM, the Space Knight.
No.
Yeah, ROM, the Space Knight. Yeah, it was really
so
good.
So obviously, this is where I also stop again and say, so that money that you used, your parents gave you that money.
Yeah, not for comics.
Okay, but let me raise you one. I was stealing Momsy's money to go and buy comic books.
Oh, you
police!
Yeah, my mom would buy me comics. So there was a place in Surulere, James Robertson. Surulere. So there was the UTC. The UTC.
Okay, yeah.
I remember the
UTC or Kingsway. I can't remember. I believe it's Kingsway.
Maybe
it's Kingsway. Yeah. So they used to sell comics out there. So That was my initial comic shop. So that's but ever since I've not looked back, I also used to draw.
Mm-hmm.
I would draw my comics. I created a couple of characters, but Niger was not the place at the time to encourage that. So
to encourage that, I remember.
You were like, you had to focus on facial books and do stuff. So Niyi, what's your story? That's my story. I mean, I don't know if you can see all around here.
You've shown me videos and you've been showing off your hall and wall of fame.
That's it. So
I've tried to set this up so that you can see my own minuscule homage to my love for comics. But I'll quickly go back then into how I got into it, and not too dissimilar from your story. Mine kind of was a couple of things. So I grew up in a town that shall not be mentioned, where I was kind of allow me, you know that town.
Well, all four of us are proudly it. All four of us are proudly it.
We all do.
Well, okay. So basically, in that town, very sheltered. Popsy and Momsy kept us at home most of the time outside of school activities and stuff. So most of the guys I grew up with were either out playing football, always on the streets doing one thing or the other. And for me, outside of watching the Muppet Babies, I needed another form of escapism, and comic books provided that. Not in any great detail, but things like Garth and the odd Spider-Man, Superman comics.
You can go into details.
No. I'll go into details. No, I'll go into details after that town, because I really got into comics after that town. But that comics was sort of like the setting stone for it. But outside of stealing Momsy's money to send the driver to Ibadan to go and buy comics, because they weren't selling quality comics in that town. Right? Wow. The kind of comics. The kind of comics that I was getting at that time was Bendela, Fun Times,
Dauda the sexy guy.
I just didn't want to say it.
Ikebe Super. Those were not the right comics.
Those were not the right.
No,
if mommy caught you,
not for a growing boy.
I think mommy did catch me with Dauda the next thing. I mean, Dauda, whatever that guy's called, and I got into a lot of trouble. But then,
really,
you have PTSD from how she reset your brain.
Bro, all I know is that I know I shouldn't be outing myself. All I know is that one night I was asleep. I just felt a hand in my pocket. The money that I'd gone to go and steal, instead of me to go and stash it somewhere, I left it in my pocket. I woke up to a hard slap.
Really?
Hard slap, a reset. Popsy obviously did his thing at the time. But then fast forward to, I think it was around when I started internship, and this is really what got me into comic books. Is what sort of set the scene for me was when I read The Death of Superman, and that was what totally changed things for me, because I was like, in my head I was like
93.
I was like, you always had a preconceived notion of how these characters were. They were forever. They didn't die. They lived. There was always an iteration of their stories. But then my cousin, Bayo Nobule, was into comics at the time. He used to keep comics, and he had that comic edition, and I read that, and he had that with the Watchmen as well. So I read those two about the same time, and it just changed my perspective. One, that a character could be done away with, and two, there was another world of storytelling outside of the norm, which was your Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the Hulk, Justice League, all that kind of stuff. There was another world. So from that point on, I was just interested and I was sold. And ever since then, I've either collected, shared, borrowed. It's one story or the other. But I know myself and Redd even recently spoke about, because Redd actually recently got me back into comics, not because I fell off. It's just I needed a different kind of medium to get reconnected, and that medium was this little bad boy here. Digital. And at the moment, I'm reading Guy Gardner.
Oh, okay. Green Lantern.
Green Lantern, yeah.
So I'll say
Interesting.
Your comic book entry is really good. It's jarring,
Yeah.
but it's jarring, but it's good because when you're counting or when you want to mention seminal books, that book is like it's self-contained. It's one of the best graphic novels ever written.
100%.
One of the best. I wouldn't place it over Sandman, but that's just me.
Over which one?
The Sandman.
What's the guy that writes it again?
Neil Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman. Yeah. I read his stuff, but I find that there's a lot of mysticism in it and
high concept. Yeah.
It gets a bit too much. One story, yes, but multiple levels of that. I think
Sandman is awesome. There's a Netflix show season 1, which stays very true to the books. So I think you will like that. But
so you'd recommend that?
No question.
I'm noting that down now.
No question. That's the main. Yeah. So that's the main character. Okay. This is the guy. This Dream from Sandman.
Oh, that's a Dream. I got you. Yeah.
If you can
ladies and gentlemen, can you see how geeky we're getting here? We have the figurines.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wait. Oh, they're more.
Yeah, that's the level of geeky we're getting here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we have figurines.
We have
figurines. We're that.
Yeah.
I'm not showing off my own figurines today. I'm not doing that with you people. Okay. Guys have figures. Guys have figurines.
Okay.
Should we start? Oh no! Don't do that! Don't do that! Don't do that!
Superman.
Oh, no.
Mine's bigger than yours. Get away!
I like this, man. I really like.
All right, let's go. Let's come back.
So I have a couple of questions.
Let me pass the rope, a line, and bring you guys back into.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Question. Go ahead. Question.
I have a couple of questions. So
yeah.
When you moved from, and any of you can answer this, when you moved from reading comics, and then now going to presumably watching the comics live, maybe in cartoons, and then now morph into real life human beings, like the actual human beings acting the films, like in Batman, Superman.
Yeah.
How did that translate for you? Did that blow it into, okay, this makes more sense? Or are you still more of like, no, my comic is still
So I know the question you're asking.
Yeah.
In the initial years, when we had the X-Men, I forget what year that came out, where you had the Jean Grey.
2000.
Yeah. The intrigue was there, the hype and the anticipation of what they were going to do with those characters was there. And I was happy for it. But after a while, when you started having the Marvel movies of the MCU, which they've done a really good job with, and I've enjoyed loads of those franchises. The issue then becomes the appreciation that people like myself and Redd have probably had and the time invested in reading those books and having the imagination of what those characters could do. The imagination is taken away from you, and somebody else creates that space. Now they've done. Don't get me wrong. Christopher Nolan's done a good job with the Batman series. Matt Reeves has done a good job with his Batman. They've done a good job with the Joker. They've done some good stuff with Daredevil. But I still feel that you're robbing the comic book lover of that sort of imagination that I grew up with. But I think I needed that imagination and inspiration at the time where there wasn't that much out there. But now for the new viewers of this medium, I'm not entirely sure if they're allowed to come up with their own sort of imagination. It's just been given to them. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's sort of like a ready-made meal as opposed to you sort of building stuff from scratch. So for me, it's half and half.
I'll tell you what Niyi just did. He's very right, by the way, but he's just giving you the very, very geek answer that you get from most geeks.
Yeah.
So we started
Wow.
reading this. We started reading this comic. Then became it became like the best time to be alive, to see your comic book characters leap to life.
Come to life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you always had the cartoons, but there's no feeling beats the first time you see a Superman on screen flying, a Batman really doing what you've read, or seeing the Avengers come together the way you've always imagined it. Once that hype goes, and you know what the source material is, you can. I've never taken crack or anything, but I hear the first high. I
love the disclaimer, bro.
Yeah. But I hear the first your first high is always the best, and that's what you're always going to try to reach.
Yeah, recreate.
You can never get that hype back. You see that moment, and after that, we now start. Especially if you've read the books, you now start nitpicking. You now start saying that, wow, in the books, this guy was a bit more realistic, was a bit more grounded. Then other people are now interpreting it their own way. And you always, we who were comic book readers, will always have problems with that. For those who just come in when the wave, people who were never geeks, who never really cared, they just want to go watch a superhero movie. They don't care. I would watch Endgame and I see them travel in time. Like, this time travel doesn't track. Like, where are these people in this world? We become
Absolutely.
become very, very nitpicky because we know the source material. Yeah, go ahead.
It's like the TVA from
Loki.
Loki.
But guess what's the highest rated Marvel TV show?
It's got to be Loki. No, it's got to be Loki. No. I like the feel of it. Yeah. I like what they've tried to do with it with the TVA, because the TVA then creates that space for them to do all this other time travel stuff and try and walk
timelines.
Timelines, exactly. But for me, it also means that it never ends. You can recreate. Look at what they're going to try and do with Doctor Doom. Look at what they're going to try and do with the Fantastic Four. And for me, it's like, no, the source material. You're messing with the source material. And I know that's geeky, but for me, it's like, let's stick to the script.
We become very, very nitpicky about that. There's a sense of like ownership, like the mess.
Yeah, I mean, before you ask your second question, maybe Redd can help me out with this. The one thing that always messed with me, even though I agree with the character, Nick Fury, right, was always a white dude.
Okay,
when did he transition to be Samuel L. Jackson?
No. So the Nick Fury, the Nick Fury, the Samuel L. Jackson is at 616. That's this universe. So that
forget that one. No.
You see, so and that's where the problem is. But you see, allow me to take your kid. If you take anybody, they don't care. This question is
asking.
People don't care, but I get it. So there's this endless multiverses at 616. There's all these numbers, and so the Marvel
the
Marvel universe is set in 616, which has the Black Nick Fury, and it's just a cop out to how they handled characters. Okay, you can kill this one, but he dies in this world,
in this timeline, this world, and he comes in another world.
So it's a way. So initially, DC used to do events where it'll be like incursion and stuff, and everything ends, and they reset it. But they now got this whole timelines, different so they have timelines, and they have multiverses, and they have
multiverses but I was going to raise something here. The problem with, and I see the point he is making, but even in the comic book world, okay, we have multiverses.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so in making the movies, they simply picked a specific multiverse, a specific timeline to base their movies on. And they could just as easily have gone with a timeline where Nick Fury was white. But again, it's a story. For me, my experience with comics was very similar to mine. Is actually from primary school. My mom used to buy me books, and my classmates, I had a couple of classmates who loved comic books. And so I remember reading the Teen Titans in maybe primary 2 or something. My mother had rules about not being able to borrow from your friends and co. And so who remembers Tonton? We called it Tintin in those days, Tonton, and Asterix. And
okay, yeah.
You know that universe, that world, for me, it was an escape. It was a chance to escape from school.
Herb or Herge?
Hervé.
Okay.
It was an escape. Exactly. It was an escape for me. It was, and then I remember going to Domino's Supermarket in Yaba, and then they would have up until maybe like last month, and they wouldn't have the next one. And then there was a problem with that. But I remember as a child getting to a point where I started getting confused by this multiple timeline issue, right? I think it was by the time I got to secondary school where, because I wasn't able to follow a canon, you're not following this particular timeline. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you now have a comic book, same character, but based on it. And now looking at them, wondering, I remember being confused by it. And it wasn't until I became an adult. In fact, it wasn't until the movies came out. No. When I got my first iPad and I got the comics app on that iPad, I now started realizing that there were multiple. It was then that timelines were tied up for me. This confusion from my childhood was tied up for me. How there are multiple Teen Titans and the Titans and Teen Titans. It was.
And then the other thing to add to that point that you're making is, obviously, as a teenager and as a kid growing up, I wouldn't have been able to make that distinction. I was just reading everything that came my way.
Yeah.
It's now as an adult that I'm also able to make the distinction that certain writers are brought in to give new life to some characters, and they tell the stories in slightly different ways to catch a slightly different audience. So I say that I'll use the example of a guy that I really like, and I think I spoke to Redd about him, Ed Brubaker. He was brought in to write or to rewrite
which one?
Captain America.
Yeah.
So the whole concept of the Winter...
He's a good writer. They're really good.
Yeah. So the whole concept of the Winter Soldier, Captain America, Civil War was written... I'm right? Right. It was written by this guy. Yeah, correct. So he will have a spin on the Captain America character. Redd introduced me to this new telling of the DC characters. Redd, that's the absolute, right? The absolute.
Absolute, yeah.
Correct. So they brought in writers as well to retell our characters. So your Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter. I've literally, for the last 2 weeks since Redd put me on it, been reading these retelling of these characters, and they tell the stories in slightly different ways. I don't even think they're calling it a different universe. They're just retelling the story from their own point of view. So a writer will be brought in into a franchise to tell the story to capture a new audience. And then in this particular Absolute series, they're actually putting in concepts there that are more relatable to today's reader. Things like AI, things like funds, like financial instruments to sort of, like, Batman's a rich kid. He's investing in some funds to fund something else. Or the Joker. Redd, am I spoiling this for you, by the way? Have you read?
No, you're not. Go ahead. No.
Okay. Like in the Absolute Batman, where the Joker is a financier, he's funding different projects around the world, and then Arc M is being funded in Gotham. So essentially, bringing in concepts that are more relatable to today's reader anyway. So different writers will come in and put their spin on stuff. So that adds to that variation there.
So